It was the morning of July 19, 2004, in Salt Lake City, Utah. The sun was rising over the Wasatch Mountains, casting long shadows across Memory Grove Park. Joggers followed their usual routes. Dog walkers moved through familiar trails. Everything seemed ordinary. But somewhere in that peaceful landscape, a young woman had vanished without a trace. Within hours, her disappearance would trigger one of the largest searches in Salt Lake City history. Yet, beneath the surface of this seemingly straightforward missing person case lay something far more disturbing. A web of deception that had been carefully constructed over the years. Lies that had grown so elaborate, they left no room for truth. And a desperate act that would shock a tight community to its core. This is the tragic story of Lorie hacking. Welcome back to the Silent Files, where real crimes reveal hidden truths. If you're a fan of true crime and criminal investigations, please be sure to subscribe, like our videos, and turn on your notification bell so you never miss an episode. Now, let's dive into today's case. Lorie K. Suarez was born on December 22, 1976, in Orem, Utah. She grew up in a loving family as the youngest of 4 children. Her parents, Iraldo and Thelma Suarez, raised their children in the tradition of the Church of Latter-day Saints, instilling values of faith, family, and community service. From an early age, Lorie displayed a warmth that drew people to her. Friends described her as genuine, caring, and deeply loyal. She had an infectious smile and a gift for making others feel valued. She wasn't seeking attention or recognition. She simply cared about people, and it showed in everything she did. Lorie was also driven and ambitious. After graduating from high school, she pursued higher education with determination. She worked hard, balanced multiple responsibilities, and set clear goals for herself. Those who knew her saw a young woman who knew what she wanted from life and wasn't afraid to work for it. In the late 1990s, Lorie met Mark Douglas Hacking. Mark was born on February 7, 1977, also in Utah. Like Lorie, he came from a well-respected family within the local community. His father was a prominent pediatrician, and the Hacking family was known for their involvement in church activities and community service. Mark appeared to be everything a young woman like Lorie might hope for. He was intelligent, came from a good family, and seemed to have a bright future ahead of him. He was pursuing a career in medicine, following in his father's footsteps. He was polite, well-mannered, and shared Lorie's faith and values. Their relationship developed quickly. Friends and family saw 2 young people who seemed perfectly matched. Both were active in their church. Both valued family. Both had ambitions and dreams for the future. In 1999, Mark and Lorie married in a ceremony that reflected their shared faith and commitment. For the first few years of their marriage, everything appeared to be going according to plan. Mark was supposedly working toward his degree, preparing for medical school. Lorie worked as a stockbroker at Wells Fargo Investments, providing financial stability while supporting her husband's education. She believed in him completely and was willing to sacrifice her own immediate goals to help him achieve his dreams. The couple lived modestly but comfortably in Salt Lake City. They attended church regularly, spent time with both families, and talked often about their plans. Mark would become a doctor. They would start a family. They would build the life they had always imagined together. By 2004, those plans seemed to be coming to fruition. Mark told Lorie that he had been accepted to medical school at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. It was a prestigious program, a significant achievement. Lorie was overjoyed. All the years of sacrifice and support were finally paying off. They would be moving to North Carolina, starting fresh, beginning the next chapter of their lives. And there was more good news. In the spring of 2004, Lorie discovered she was pregnant. She was 5 weeks along, thrilled at the prospect of becoming a mother. Everything she had hoped for, was finally falling into place. A new city, a new beginning, and a baby on the way. Friends and family celebrated with them. Lorie's parents were excited about becoming grandparents. Mark's family expressed pride in his acceptance to medical school. The couple began making preparations to move across the country. They packed boxes, said their goodbyes, and looked forward to their future with genuine excitement. But what Lorie didn't know, what no one knew, was that none of it was real. Mark Hacking had not been accepted to medical school in North Carolina. In fact, he had never even applied. The acceptance letter he showed Lorie, the one that sparked so much joy and celebration, was a forgery. But the lies ran much deeper than that single deception. Mark had not graduated from the University of Utah, as he had claimed. He had attended classes sporadically over the years, but had never completed his degree. The transcripts he showed his wife were fabricated. The stories about exams and coursework were fiction. For years, while Lorie went to work each day, believing she was supporting her husband's education, Mark had been maintaining an elaborate charade. He would leave the apartment each morning as if heading to class. He would return in the evening with stories about lectures and study groups. But in reality, he spent his days wandering around Salt Lake City, sitting in parks, going to movies, doing anything but attending school. The deception was staggering in its scope. Mark had convinced not only his wife but also his parents, his siblings, and his friends that he was on track to become a doctor. He had maintained this fiction for years, layering lie upon lie, creating a version of reality that existed only in his own telling. Psychologists who would later study the case suggested that Mark may have suffered from a condition sometimes called imposter syndrome, taken to an extreme level. He wanted to live up to the expectations placed upon him. He wanted to be the person everyone believed he was. But instead of doing the actual work, he simply pretended. And as the lies accumulated, the gap between fiction and reality grew wider until it became impossible to bridge. By July 2004, that gap was about to close. The planned move to North Carolina was approaching rapidly. Soon, very soon, the truth would emerge. There would be no medical school to attend, no new apartment waiting for them, no future as a doctor. Everything would collapse, and Lorie was pregnant, excited, hopeful, trusting, making plans for their baby, talking about the kind of life they would build in North Carolina, completely unaware that the man she had married, the man she had supported and believed in, had been lying to her for years. On July 15, 2004, just 4 days before Lorie's disappearance, the University of North Carolina contacted the Hackings. Someone from the school, likely from the admissions or registrar's office, reached out regarding Mark's enrollment. The specifics of that conversation remain unclear, but it was enough to raise questions, enough to prompt Lorie to start asking her own questions. Mark later admitted that around this time, Lorie had begun to suspect something was wrong. She had started making phone calls, checking on details. The carefully constructed facade was beginning to crack. Some accounts suggest she may have discovered the truth about Mark's lack of graduation from the University of Utah. Others indicate she was simply feeling uneasy, sensing that something didn't add up. What is certain is that by July 18th, the night before her disappearance, Lorie knew. Whether she had discovered the full extent of Mark's deception or only pieces of it, she knew enough. She knew her husband had been lying to her. That evening, Lorie called her father. She was at her parents' home in Orem, about an hour south of Salt Lake City. She was upset and told him she needed to talk. They made plans for her to return the next day for a longer conversation. But Lorie never made it to that meeting. What happened that night in the Hacking apartment remains known only to one person. But investigators would later piece together what they believed occurred in those final hours. On the morning of July 19, 2004, at approximately 10 a.m., Mark Hacking called the police to report that his wife was missing. He told authorities that Lorie had gone for a jog in Memory Grove Park around 5:30 that morning and had not returned. He said he had woken up, realized she was gone, and when hours passed without her coming home, he became concerned. Mark sounded distressed on the call. He described what Lorie had been wearing: running shorts, a white shirt, and a blue headband. He mentioned that this was her regular jogging route, and that it was unlike her to be gone so long without contacting him. Police responded immediately. Memory Grove Park, while generally safe during daylight hours, had secluded areas and trails that led into the surrounding canyons. If Lorie had been injured during her jog, if she had fallen or encountered some difficulty, time was critical. Within hours, a massive search operation was underway. Law enforcement officers, search and rescue teams, and hundreds of volunteers descended on Memory Grove Park. They spread out across the trails, calling Lorie's name, searching through brush and rocky terrain. Helicopters flew overhead, scanning the area from above. News of the missing pregnant woman spread quickly through Salt Lake City. Local media began covering the story extensively. Lorie's photograph appeared on television screens and in newspapers. Friends and family made public pleas for information. The tight community rallied, with volunteers offering to help in any way they could. Mark Hacking appeared to be a devoted husband, desperately searching for his missing wife. He spoke to reporters, his voice breaking as he described Lorie and begged for her safe return. He participated in searches, walking through the park, calling out to her. Family members stood by his side, supporting him through what appeared to be every husband's nightmare. But even in those early hours, some details bothered investigators. When police interviewed Mark, they noticed inconsistencies in his story. Small things at first, but enough to raise questions. He seemed unsure about certain timelines. His description of the morning's events didn't quite match up with the physical evidence at the apartment, and there was something else. When officers searched the couple's apartment, they found Lorie's car keys and identification. If she had gone jogging, why hadn't she taken her keys? How had she planned to get back into the apartment? Mark explained that she must have left the door unlocked, but it struck investigators as odd. The mattress in the bedroom also caught their attention. It had been removed from the bed frame and was leaning against a wall. When asked about it, Mark provided explanations that seemed vague and unconvincing. He claimed he had been moving things, preparing for the upcoming move to North Carolina. As the first day of searching turned into night with no sign of Lorie, investigators began to look more closely at the last person to see her alive, her husband. The following day, July 20th, Mark's behavior became increasingly erratic. He was seen outside the apartment complex where he and Lorie lived, appearing disoriented and confused. At one point, he was found lying on the ground outside, wearing only his underwear. Family members and friends attributed this to overwhelming stress and grief, but investigators took note. That same day, police obtained a search warrant for the Hacking apartment. What they found there would begin to paint a very different picture of what had happened to Lorie Hacking. Forensic technicians used luminol, a chemical that causes blood to fluoresce under ultraviolet light. In the bedroom, on the mattress that Mark had removed from the bed frame, they found significant traces of blood. The pattern suggested someone had attempted to clean the area, but the blood remained, invisible to the naked eye but clear under forensic examination. Further investigation revealed additional evidence. Knives from the apartment were missing. The couple's bedding was gone, and despite Mark's claims that Lorie had gone jogging that morning, her running shoes were still in the apartment. Most damning of all, investigators tracked purchases Mark had made on the morning of July 19th. At 5:58 a.m., just around the time he claimed Lorie had left for her jog, Mark was captured on security footage at a local store purchasing a new mattress. Why would a man whose wife had just gone for a run be out buying a new mattress at 6 o'clock in the morning? The pieces were falling into place, and they pointed to a conclusion that shook everyone who knew the couple. Mark Hacking hadn't been searching desperately for his missing wife. He had been trying to cover up what he had done to her. On July 24, 2004, 5 days after Lorie's disappearance, Mark Hacking suffered what appeared to be a severe mental breakdown. He was admitted to a psychiatric facility under the care of medical professionals. Some believed this was a genuine crisis brought on by guilt and stress. Others suspected it was a calculated attempt to avoid police questioning or to build an insanity defense. While Mark was hospitalized, investigators continued their work. They obtained records of his activities in the days surrounding Lorie's disappearance. Cell phone data placed him in specific locations that didn't match his story. Surveillance footage from various businesses filled in gaps in the timeline. And then, on July 25th, Mark's brothers visited him at the hospital. What happened during that conversation would break the case wide open. According to reports, the brothers confronted Mark directly. They told him they knew he was lying. They knew something had happened to Lorie, and they needed him to tell them the truth. What Mark told his brothers that day was later relayed to authorities. He confessed that Lorie was dead and that he had killed her. He told them where they could find her body. The location he provided stunned everyone. Lorie Hacking was not in Memory Grove Park. She had never gone for a jog that morning. Her body was in the Salt Lake County landfill. The revelation was devastating. For days, hundreds of people had searched canyons and trails, hoping to find Lorie alive, or at least to recover her body and give her family closure. All the while, she had been discarded like trash, buried under tons of garbage in a massive landfill. On August 2nd, 2004, authorities officially shifted their search from Memory Grove Park to the Salt Lake County landfill. It was an unprecedented operation. Workers sifted through thousands of tons of waste, carefully examining everything that had been deposited during the critical time period. The smell was overwhelming. The work was painstaking and heartbreaking. Finally, on October 1st, 2004, more than 2 months after Lorie's disappearance and after examining over 2,000 tons of garbage, searchers found human remains. Forensic analysis confirmed what everyone feared. They were the remains of Lorie Hacking. Because of the conditions in the landfill and the time that had passed, the remains were in poor condition. A full forensic examination was difficult. However, investigators were able to determine enough to proceed with charges. Lorie had died from a gunshot wound to the head. With physical evidence now recovered and Mark's confession to his brothers, prosecutors moved forward. On April 15, 2005, Mark Hacking pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. He admitted to killing his wife in their bed while she slept during the early morning hours of July 19, 2004. According to Mark's confession, the events of that night unfolded in the cruelest possible way. Lorie had confronted him about his lies. She had discovered, or was about to discover, the full extent of his deception. There would be no medical school, no move to North Carolina, no life he had promised her. Everything was built on falsehoods. Rather than face the consequences of his lies, rather than admit what he had done and accept responsibility, Mark chose violence. While Lorie slept, trusting and vulnerable, he shot her in the head. He then wrapped her body, placed it in a dumpster, and purchased a new mattress to replace the blood-stained one. He created the fiction of the morning jog and called police, playing the role of the concerned husband while his wife's body was being transported to a landfill. On June 6, 2005, Mark Hacking was sentenced to 6 years to life in prison. Under Utah law, this meant he would serve a minimum of 6 years before becoming eligible for parole, but could potentially remain incarcerated for the rest of his life. The courtroom was filled with emotion that day. Lorie's family sat together, grief etched into every face. They had lost Lorie and their unborn grandchild. They had been forced to endure the agony of a search they now knew was futile from the beginning, and they had learned that the man they had welcomed into their family had betrayed their trust in the most horrific way possible. Lorie's father, Geraldo Suarez, addressed the court. He spoke about his daughter's kindness, her excitement about becoming a mother, and the bright future that had been stolen from her. He expressed forgiveness toward Mark, rooted in his faith, but also made clear that forgiveness did not erase the magnitude of what had been done. Mark's own family was also devastated. His father, a respected physician, his mother, his siblings, all had believed in him. They had supported the fiction he created, never suspecting the depth of his deception. Now they faced not only the loss of their relationship with Lorie, whom they had loved, but also the knowledge that their son and brother was a murderer. Mark himself addressed the court briefly. He apologized to Lorie's family and to his own. He acknowledged that no words could undo what he had done. But his apology rang hollow to many who heard it. After all, he had shown no remorse in the days following the murder. He had allowed hundreds of people to search in vain. He had let Lorie's family suffer, hoping against hope that she might be found alive. As Mark was led away to begin his sentence, questions remained. How had someone maintained such elaborate lies for so long? What drove him to construct this false reality rather than simply admitting he had failed to meet expectations? And most haunting of all, at what point did he decide that murder was preferable to facing the truth? Psychologists who examined the case offered various theories. Some suggested Mark suffered from a personality disorder that made it difficult for him to accept failure or disappointment. Others pointed to the pressure of living up to family expectations, particularly with a father who was a successful doctor. Still others noted that chronic lying can become its own trap. Each lie requires additional lies to support it, until the web becomes so complex that the person can no longer find a way out. What seems clear is that Mark Hacking was not a violent person by nature. He had no history of physical aggression. Those who knew him described him as mild-mannered and non-confrontational. The murder of Lorie appears to have been an act of desperation, a final attempt to prevent his carefully constructed world from collapsing entirely. Of course, this explanation doesn't excuse what he did. It simply illustrates how far he was willing to go to avoid facing consequences. In the years following his incarceration, Mark has reportedly expressed genuine remorse. He has participated in rehabilitation programs and has reportedly come to understand the severity of his actions. But remorse cannot bring Lorie back. It cannot give her parents their daughter or give Lorie the chance to raise the child she was carrying. Mark has appeared before the parole board multiple times. Each time, Lorie's family has submitted statements opposing his release. They argue that 6 years is not sufficient punishment for taking a life and destroying a family. The parole board has consistently denied his requests, and Mark remains incarcerated. The Suarez family has channeled their grief into advocacy. They have spoken publicly about domestic violence, about the warning signs that can precede tragedy, and about the importance of truth in relationships. They established a memorial fund in Lorie's name, supporting causes she cared about and helping other families affected by violence. The case of Lorie Hacking reminds us that evil doesn't always announce itself with obvious signs. Mark Hacking wasn't a career criminal. He wasn't known for violence or aggression. To outward appearances, he was an ordinary man from a good family, someone who should have been building a life, not destroying one. But beneath that ordinary exterior was a man trapped in a prison of his own making, a prison built from lies, maintained through deception, and ultimately escaped through an act of unthinkable violence. When confronted with the truth, when faced with the collapse of his fabricated reality, he chose the most cowardly path imaginable. He killed the woman who loved him, who had supported him, who was carrying his child. Lorie's story is a reminder that we must pay attention to the people in our lives. We must ask questions when things don't add up. We must trust our instincts when something feels wrong. And we must remember that the most dangerous lies are often the ones we tell ourselves about the people we love. Thanks for tuning in to The Silent Files, where real crimes reveal hidden truths. If you found this case compelling, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new investigation. Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you next time.